David Littleproud joining us from Cairns this morning. Thanks for being with us. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we just heard you there talk about the need for a relationship reset with the United States. What do you mean by that?
Well, obviously the Prime Minister's made disparaging comments about President Trump previously, and there's no way in the world that his advisors haven't dropped that in his ear somewhere along the line. And when you can't get a phone call or even a meeting in the lead up to what we could see was coming in terms of Liberation Day, and you see countries like Mexico and Canada that didn't get blanket tariffs, they still had tariffs put on particular industries, but there was some nuances in terms of the concessions that they were able to get. We have a compelling case, a more compelling case than what we did in 2018 when we got a carve-out. We actually did just drop a cheque for $800 million a couple of months ago for the first instalment on those Virginia-class submarines. And that's about the enhancement of the necessity and need for us to acquire more military hardware to protect our nation as these geopolitical threats continue. But it's about making sure that you can have respect, and it's not just about protecting brand Australia, it's actually taking a leadership role globally, being able to demonstrate to President Trump this is bad policy. It's bad policy for the United States, it's bad policy for Australia, but it's bad policy for the world, and we have an international responsibility to lead that, and because we have that relationship, we should be able to lean into it.
But to be clear, Canada and Mexico have got higher tariffs than Australia, and even the United Kingdom. I mean, Keir Starmer has a good relationship, it seems, and Trump spoke to him on the phone, but he still copped the 10% tariff as well. Do you seriously think Australia could have avoided this?
Well, if you could pick the phone up and get it answered, or you could get in the front door of the White House. The Albanese government has been basically placid in their response to this. They haven't been forward-leaning in trying to even get that phone call when we could see what was coming and leverage the relationship, and about that position that we are going to lean in very heavily because of the legacy that the former coalition government left with AUKUS, to be able to defend ourselves, an island nation, and to have the military hardware that we're going to need. We're going to have to procure that from somewhere. We should be making sure we leverage every position as we did in 2018, but we've also got a global responsibility, David, to lead the world, because we do have that unique relationship with the United States, to make it clear to President Trump this is bad policy. The people of the United States are going to hurt from this, and while it only represents about 5% of our trade to the United States, it's actually what he's doing globally to our other trading partners that'll have a global impact. And you need leadership, you need calm, strong leadership, but you've got to be able to get in the door, and you've got to be able to have the phone picked up.
So when you say we should leverage that defence relationship, are you saying we should buy more American kit? And is that rewarding Trump for doing this?
Well, we already are, David, and that's what I'm saying, is that we should be able to leverage the fact that we've created this partnership with the United States and UK to keep peace in our region, and that we are going to need the hardware that we don't have here in Australia. We're an island nation, and those submarines, the technology that our submariners should have. We should be able to look the mums and dads of our submariners in the eye and tell them that they've got the best technology in the world. We're going to keep them safe with that, and we're also going to need missiles and F-35s to be able to defend our island nation. This threat is real, but you've got to be able to prove that you can defend yourself, and you have those partnerships, and we're going to have to ramp up our spending with respect to defence to make sure that Australians can feel safe and that we keep peace in our region.
Shouldn't we buy the best missiles for Australia, the best equipment to protect our island nation, as you say, rather than respond to something like this from Donald Trump and say, OK, we'll buy your stuff because you've hit us with a tariff?
Well, we will buy the best, David, and this is more than just hardware. It's also the relationship on boots on the ground and military operations and enhancement about where there's mutual agreement, but also mutual benefit. That's just common sense. That's how the world operates. You'd be naive to think otherwise. There's an opportunity for us to leverage that long-standing relationship with the United States, of us standing shoulder to shoulder in their hour of need and our hour of need together, to make sure that we don't just look after Australia, but we actually look after the rules-based order globally that has served the United States, Australia and the world well, and we should return to that as quickly as possible. You need to be able to get in that room.
Do you think some might say, though, that you're talking about rewarding a bully?
No, David. I think this is about understanding that we'll give our defence the best they need, but in other areas where we have resources to make sure, as you do with individual trade agreements already, in articulating those on a bilateral arrangement, is leveraging your advantages to be able to get a better deal. That happens in international trade as we stand now, and the 16 free trade agreements that we put in place while we were in government actually leverage much of that, of being able to leverage our natural resources and the opportunities and the challenges that the world face.
I want to ask you about what this means for the global trading system. I mean, free trade has helped Australian farmers for decades and decades. How concerned are you about the system, the impact this has on the system that we've benefited from for so long?
Yeah, look, I think that, as I say, the United States accounts for about 5% of our trade, and the beef industry is the most exposed. But what doesn't make sense in any of this is the United States doesn't have the production system to produce the beef that's going into their Big Macs. This is a Big Mac tax that the people of the United States will feel in a very lived experience in the next 3 to 6 months because they are still going to have to import beef. But what the real impact will be is the impact on our other trading partners in Asia. And we saw it last time, and I was Agriculture Minister when President Trump imposed tariffs on China. What they did is they pivoted, and they pivoted into other markets. And when you look at the Australian dollar and where is it at the moment, Australian commodities look very attractive. But we also need to make sure that that leadership, and what Kevin Hogan, our Shadow Trade Minister, has said is that we need to pivot into the comprehensive Trans-Pacific partnership that we put in place that Labor said don't bother about with those other key economic partners, about trying to find new markets, better access, as well as engaging the EU again in giving us that opportunities. And I think the world will try and trade around the US as much as it can, and in commodities where it can, but particularly in food where it has to. And I think you'll see some perverse outcomes for US farmers in the long term. And I saw that play out last time, and it'll be that lived experience that I think will put pressure on President Trump, the lived experience, not just of their farmers, but their consumers down the track. But until then, we need strong leadership globally, and you've got to be able to get the phone picked up and a meeting taken to be able to do that. And Prime Minister Dutton will make a trip to the United States in his first 60 days to get that put through and to leverage our long-standing relationship, one that's predicated on respect and not one that has had disparaging remarks between any of the two.
I want to move on to some other issues. The Port of Darwin. Look, both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader are now saying that it should not be in Chinese hands. There's a bit of an argument over who got to this position first, but let me ask you why. Why should the Port of Darwin not be owned by the Chinese-owned land bridge?
Well, it's not owned, it's a lease, firstly, but it's a 99-year lease and it's close to a strategic military asset. And when the decision was previously made in 2015 by the Northern Territory government, the geopolitical environment was a lot different to what it is now. And it's continued to evolve and change. And when you get that advice, your responsibility as a government is to move with it.
So and what's the advice?
To make sure that you protect it. Well, obviously that's advice that both the government and Peter Dutton have been provided around the strategic importance of that asset. And there's a need for it, and that's why we've made that decision, and the Prime Minister rushed his decision on a phone call to Darwin ABC to catch up. But the reality is it is a key piece of real estate strategically for Australia and the Pacific in maintaining stability in our region.
It's your understanding there's some advice from an intelligence or security agency that this needs to happen?
Well, there is ongoing advice, David, about the evolving geopolitical threats that are coming to our region.
Have you seen it?
You only have to well, I think a Virgin pilot saw it, David. Thank God for him. He flew over that boat, remember? If it wasn't for Virgin, that Virgin captain, we probably would have been none the wiser. So
it's that,
I think the advice is pretty clear.
When Chinese warships
Chinese ships
that's made the decision up, is it, to take Port of Darwin off land bridge?
this has been something that as a coalition we've been working towards for a long time, and making sure that we get the settings right and understanding the legislative opportunities that we could take to make this. The government has rushed simply to match it. It doesn't look as though they'd undertake any real undertakings to do this. It's only because we'd led on this, but it's more broadly about the geopolitical change to the environment in which we live in, and that's what your responsibility is if you want to be the government, is primarily to keep your people safe.
I want to turn to energy prices. Labor's today promising these 30% rebates on household batteries, save families up to $4,000 on a battery installation. David Littleproud, you were floating a similar sort of idea early last year. Do you support this sort of idea?
Well, you'll see the rest of our energy policy in the coming short period, in fact, well before the election date, so that you'll see that. But in the short term, not everyone can afford a battery, unfortunately, David. A poor old pensioner out there isn't going to be able to make up the other $8,000 to be able to pay for that. Someone renting isn't going to be able to help that. What we need to do is fix the fundamentals, and that is flood the market with gas to get Australian gas back into the grid. It was Anthony Albanese, that he was part of the Labor government, that actually allowed these companies to export our gas out without having a domestic gas reservation.
I'll come to gas, but are you saying you'll have some sort of rebate for solar and batteries as well?
There's no scoop today, David, but what you'll see in totality is an energy grid that's cheaper, that's $263 billion cheaper than an all-renewables approach, one that has been modelled by frontier economics that both the Coalition and Labor Party use and trust. And for Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese to run around and say we have a $600 billion nuclear plant is wrong. It's actually costed at $331 billion, and those nuclear power plants are $120 billion.
Yeah, I will come to that. But just on batteries, you're not criticising this idea. It sounds like you might have something similar up your sleeve.
Well, what it's doing, David, and you wait till you see where our total policy is an admission that Anthony Albanese's not only not going to reach that $275 that he modelled, it's nowhere near, it's over $1,000 now, and he's got no hope of bringing it down, and it's only a select few that'll be able to afford the balance of that battery. What you've got to do is have the courage to lean in and fix the fundamentals, and if you keep going down the same path, they've already spent $7 billion on giving you an energy rebate. Ultimately, that money's going to run out. It's your money. You've got to have the courage to say the path that you are going down is not working. We should have an energy mix, not one that is an all-renewables approach that no country of the industrial scale the size of Australia has gone down.
Let's talk about your gas plan. Peter Dutton initially said it would bring gas prices down from $14 to $10 a gigajoule. Now we're being told it'll save only at 15% for industry on their gas bills. Which is it?
Well, it will do both, David, and what you'll see, and we'll be announcing this modelling and about how this mechanism works. In effect, there's about 1,200 petajoules that are foundation contracts that we're not going to touch. We have to maintain our international relationships. What we're also have in our domestic grid at the moment is around 500 petajoules that comes from the domestic grid, but there's 300 petajoules that Anthony Albanese let keep going out on a boat rather than keeping for Australians when he was last in government, that we're saying about 50 to 100 petajoules of that should come into the domestic market to not just bring down grocery bills, because food processors are using them, they'll get a significant reduction, and in terms of your overall energy bill, because it's about 6% of the market outside, or of the total grid outside Northern Territory and Western Australia. So it'll be a smaller reduction on your energy bill, but it's about getting some short-term and quick relief, because you can get gas into the grid quicker than any other source. And there's about 140 petajoules that's sitting down in Victoria in the Gippsland. About 30 to 40 of that can be bought on with some investment, and that's why complementary to this is we've said we're going to build that capacity constraint mechanism to remove it, to build the infrastructure to get gas in, and that will then mean that it'll give confidence for gas companies to continue to drill and to get gas into our grid, but continue to export, because that also helps us pay our bills.
I mean, I guess the thing is, you know, fixing these problems, none of it's easy. You guys were in government for 9 years. You didn't do any of this. We still haven't seen the detail of how you'll do it.
I disagree with you on that.
Well, you didn't do what you're talking about now.
I disagree with you on that, David. No,
this
David,
is a new idea,
if you do recall, gas-led No. If you talk about a gas-led recovery, we didn't put in place mechanisms on gas companies because we could work with them to lift that supply when we needed to. And so what we're saying is that we need to leave a legacy of, no matter who's in government, to put in place an East Coast market mechanism that protects and gives Australians first crack at their own gas first.
So this is the same as
we get that.
So this is the same as the Morrison government's gas-led recovery approach. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's about making sure you're investing in gas, and that's why we're complimentary of $1 billion in getting the capacity built up to get that domestic gas, particularly from Victoria.
The gas reservation idea, is that new, or are you saying this is not a new idea?
Well, now we're imposing a charge so that Australians get that 50 to 100 petajoules extra that we'll need until we get that peak amount of around 550 to 600 petajoules. Until that's put into the domestic grid, then there will be a charge for those spot cargo boats that go out.
So
until
what's
we
the
get
charge
that.
going to be?
We want to work collaboratively.
What's the charge?
Well, that's what you'll see. That's what you'll see as we announce this, along with other measures within our energy policy. As we've been very upfront around the modelling on our nuclear energy. We've been very upfront. That is the medium to long-term solution, but in the short term.
Can you just explain why we can't see the details of this charge on gas exports that you're talking about?
Well, as one of your panellists beautifully articulated last week, not too many people have been engaged. We're going to announce our policies when it's right and we get the best bang for buck.
But even Gina Reinhardt wants to see the detail on this. Industry's a bit concerned.
Well, look, industry are about making money and we want them to make money, but what I want to do and what Peter Dutton wants to do is to look after the little guy, to look after the food processor that's had a 30-40% increase in their gas bill each year to be able to try and get your grocery bill down. You've got to, at some point, we've got to have the courage to fix the problems in this country, and we've got the resources to do it, but you can't be done with ideology, and we should have a mixed grid. And we should draw on our resources so Australians get first crack at it.
Look, just a few other things on nuclear. Some polls suggest there isn't a lot of support in the areas where you want to build the nuclear plants. Are you or is anyone going to these local areas to talk to locals about it?
Yeah, my own electorate, David, and I think if you want another proof point, go to the Western Australian election. The good people of Collie voted for the Liberal Party. Our polling shows very strongly that people that are going to host one of these plants have energy literacy higher than you and I, because nearly 80% of them will have a job in a transition across to a nuclear power plant. And regional Australia, we all want to reduce emissions, but I just say to people in capital cities, just understand what you're asking us to bear, the burden of having an all renewables approach. The turbines, the panels, the transmission lines is tearing up our prime agricultural land, your food security, and actually destroying the very native environment we're trying to protect, when we could have zero emissions technology, reuse the same transmission lines that are there, and it is $263 billion cheaper than an all renewables approach. Okay. And the reality is we should have a mixed grid, not put all our energy eggs in one basket, and that's just common sense. We just say to people, we want to reduce emissions, just understand what you're asking regional Australia to do, and we should have a say in it. And I can tell you those 7 sites, it's popular because they know they've got a future, they've got a job, not just for 15 years, but for 60 to 80 years.
On immigration, Peter Dutton's today announced plans to cut the foreign student intake by 80,000. What about working holiday makers? That's a big cohort of the net overseas migration. 63,000 came in last year. Would the coalition lower the number of working holiday makers?
Yeah, well, what you'll see is Dan Tehan and Peter will actually announce the total numbers, and I think it's important, Peter, that we look at it in totality. This is an important component that will feed into it. We've been very clear, be upfront about what our permanent migration will be, but there's a number of different actual visas, classes that need to be put into this so that there is oversight and clarity for everybody. What we want it to be is upfront, and we'll be very clear about, across all those visa sectors, about the numbers that we're looking at.
And you'll bring back the agriculture visa that was scrapped?
Yes, and that's one commitment we've already made, and we'll bring it back as we actually implemented it before we lost government, because it's important that regional Australians have that resource.
Just finally, David Littleproud, the floods in your part of Queensland and so much of Western Queensland. The PM was there yesterday. He's announced further support. Is it enough?
Look, I think it's a big start, and I got to say the bipartisanship and the support of the Queensland government, firstly on the radars, that's important. I heard near-death experiences last weekend in Quilpie from people in Adavale. They had no communication, they had no warning. The bomb had no warning to give them, but also this dog fencing, it's so important. You can't restock unless we put these fences back up because they're just going to get chewed out. So I've been calling for it, and I do thank the Prime Minister and I thank the Premier particularly, but also those mayors. Poor old Tractor Ferguson out there at Thargo, he's led a community, 220 people that are all living at an airport for nearly a week now. They're real heroes, our local mayors, and those people are strong, but we're just going to need to help them. I just say to everybody, give us a month and come out and visit us if you could. There's motels are beautiful, you don't need a caravan. The best way you can support us is give us a month to wash ourselves off and come out and spend $1 out there. It's the most beautiful part of our country.
All right, good advice. David Littleproud, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.